The champagne flute shattered on the marble floor, its crash slicing through the hum of the gala like a gunshot. Eliza Kane stood frozen, her heart pounding as every eye in the opulent hotel ballroom turned toward her. She wasn't supposed to be here, not like this, not with a tray of drinks trembling in her hands and a stranger's voice barking, "Waiter, clean this up." Eliza wasn't a waiter. She owned the damn hotel. But in her plain black blazer, stepping in to help an overwhelmed staff member, she'd been mistaken for one. Again. The mistake stung, not because of the assumption, but because it reminded her of every time she'd been underestimated, her ambition dismissed, her identity questioned. At 28, with her sharp jawline and cropped brown hair, she carried herself with a quiet strength that often went unnoticed in rooms like the champagne flute shattered on the marble floor, its crash slicing through the hum of the gala like a gunshot. Eliza Kane stood frozen, her heart pounding as every eye in the opulent hotel ballroom turned toward her. She wasn't supposed to be here, not like this, not with a tray of drinks trembling in her hands and a stranger's voice barking, "Waiter, clean this up." Eliza wasn't a waiter. She owned the damn hotel. But in her plain black blazer, stepping in to help an overwhelmed staff member, she'd been mistaken for one. Again. The mistake stung, not because of the assumption, but because it reminded her of every time she'd been underestimated, her ambition dismissed, her identity questioned. At 28, with her sharp jawline and cropped brown hair, she carried herself with a quiet strength that often went unnoticed in rooms like this, where wealth and privilege reigned. The gala was a glittering affair, hosted at the Grand Aurora, a boutique hotel in downtown Seattle that Eliza had poured her soul into rebuilding. Its chandeliers sparkled like captured stars, and the walls whispered history, her history. She'd inherited the crumbling property from her estranged father 3 years ago, a man who'd never accepted her for who she was. Turning it into a success was her defiance, her proof that she could thrive on her own terms. But tonight, as she stood amidst the city's elite, she felt the familiar weight of being unseen. Miss the Mess. The man who'd snapped at her, a silver-haired executive in a tailored suit, waved impatiently. His tone dripped with condescension, as if she were invisible beyond her assumed role. Eliza's jaw tightened, but before she could respond, a soft hand grazed her arm. "Let me help," a voice said, low and warm. Eliza turned, and her breath caught. The woman beside her was striking, long blonde hair cascading over a navy gown, her green eyes sharp with empathy. She looked about Eliza's age, maybe a year younger, with a presence that felt both grounded and electric. "I'm Claire," she said, kneeling to gather the glass shards before Eliza could protest. "And you don't deserve to be spoken to like that." Eliza blinked, caught off guard by the kindness. "I'm fine," she said, her voice quieter than she intended. She crouched beside Claire, their hands brushing as they worked. The brief touch sent a jolt through her, unexpected and disarming. She wasn't used to people seeing her not like this, not beyond the assumptions. As they stood, Claire's gaze lingered. "You don't seem like you belong out here serving drinks," she said, a playful curiosity in her tone. Eliza's lips twitched into a half-smile, unsure whether to reveal the truth. "Maybe I don't," she replied, her voice carrying a hint of defiance. The night wore on, and Eliza found herself stealing glances at Claire. She was a guest, here with a group of nonprofit organizers raising funds for queer youth shelters, a cause that hit close to home for Eliza, who'd once been a scared teenager navigating her identity in a world that felt hostile. Claire moved through the crowd with ease, her laughter bright but never forced, her presence drawing people in like a flame. Yet she kept circling back to Eliza, asking questions about the hotel, the gala, even the tiny scar above Eliza's eyebrow from a childhood fall. Each word felt like a thread pulling them closer. But the evening wasn't without tension. Eliza overheard whispers, guests speculating about her, the waiter who seemed too comfortable in the hotel's grandeur. "She's probably just staff," one woman murmured, her voice laced with dismissal. Another, louder, remarked, "She doesn't look like she belongs here." The words cut, but Eliza had learned to armor herself against them. She'd spent years proving she belonged, first to her family, then to the world. Claire, though, didn't seem to notice the whispers. Or maybe she did and chose to ignore them. When the executive from earlier approached Eliza again, demanding another drink, Claire stepped in. "I think she's busy," she said, her tone polite but firm, her hand resting lightly on Eliza's shoulder. The gesture was small but deliberate, a shield against the man's entitlement. Eliza's heart raced, not from the confrontation, but from the warmth of Claire's touch. As the gala wound down, Eliza slipped away to the hotel's rooftop garden, needing air. The Seattle skyline glittered below, a reminder of how far she'd come and how far she still had to go. She leaned against the railing, her thoughts a tangle of pride and exhaustion. Footsteps broke her reverie, and she turned to find Claire, her gown catching the moonlight. "You're not just staff, are you?" Claire asked, her voice gentle but direct. Eliza hesitated, then shook her head. "No, I own this place." The admission hung between them, heavy with unspoken stories. Claire's eyes widened, then softened with something like admiration. "That's incredible," she said, stepping closer. "Why didn't you say anything?" Eliza shrugged, her guard still up. People see what they want to see. But Claire's gaze was different, open, searching, unguarded. For the first time that night, Eliza felt truly seen. And as they stood there, the city humming below, she wondered if this stranger might unravel the walls she'd built so carefully. The rooftop garden was a sanctuary, its air crisp with the scent of jasmine and rain. Eliza's shoulders relaxed as she stood beside Claire, the city's pulse a distant hum. But the weight of the night lingered, every glance, every whispered judgment, every assumption that she was less than she was. Claire leaned against the railing, her blonde hair catching the silver glow of the moon. "This place," she said, gesturing to the garden, the hotel, the skyline beyond, "it's yours." "How did you do it?" Her voice held no trace of pity, only genuine curiosity. Eliza wasn't used to that. Most people asked questions to confirm their biases, not to understand. It wasn't easy, Eliza admitted, her gaze fixed on the distant Space Needle. "My father owned the hotel, but it was falling apart when he died. He left it to me, probably thinking I'd fail." Her voice tightened. "He never accepted me. Not my dreams, not who I am." She didn't need to elaborate. Claire's nod was enough to show she understood. Claire's fingers brushed the railing, inches from Eliza's. "But you didn't fail," she said softly. "You built something extraordinary." The words landed like a bomb, soothing a wound Eliza hadn't realized was still raw. She wanted to say more, to spill the years of struggle, fighting creditors, navigating a world that questioned her legitimacy, her identity, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she turned the question back. "What about you? Why are you here?" Claire smiled, a little wistful. "I work with the nonprofit hosting the gala. We're trying to fund shelters for queer kids, places where they can feel safe, be themselves." Her voice cracked slightly, and Eliza caught a flicker of something personal in her eyes. "I know what it's like to need that." The confession hung between them, fragile and real. Eliza wanted to ask more, but a shout from below broke the moment. "Eliza, we need you." It was Marcus, her head of staff, his voice urgent. She sighed, the weight of responsibility settling back onto her shoulders. "Duty calls," she said, offering Claire a rueful smile. Back in the ballroom, the gala was winding down, but tension simmered. A group of guests, wealthy donors, by their polished suits and haughty expressions, had cornered Marcus, complaining about the service. "Where's the manager?" one demanded, his voice loud enough to draw eyes. Eliza stepped forward, her heart sinking. She knew this type, entitled, quick to judge, blind to anything that didn't serve their ego. "I'm the owner," she said, her voice steady but firm. The group froze, their expressions shifting from annoyance to disbelief. "You," the man said, his tone dripping with skepticism. "You're just—" He stopped himself, but the unspoken words hung in the air. "Just a woman, just a nobody, just not what we expected." Claire appeared at Eliza's side, her presence a quiet anchor. "She's the one who made this night possible," Claire said, her voice calm but cutting. "Maybe you should show some respect." The man bristled, but the crowd's attention had shifted. Whispers spread. "She owns the hotel," and Eliza felt the familiar mix of pride and exhaustion. She'd fought for this recognition, but it never came without a cost. As the guests dispersed, Claire lingered. "You handled that well," she said, her smile soft but proud. Eliza shrugged, trying to brush off the weight of the moment. "I'm used to it." But Claire's hand found hers, a brief squeeze that felt like a promise. "You shouldn't have to be." They exchanged numbers before Claire left, her touch lingering in Eliza's mind long after the ballroom emptied. The next morning, Eliza found herself checking her phone, hoping for a message. When it came, "A simple coffee tomorrow?" her heart did a traitorous flip. She typed back, "Yes," before she could overthink it. Their coffee date was at a small cafe near the hotel, its windows fogged with Seattle's perpetual drizzle. Claire arrived in a sweater and jeans, her hair loose, her smile brighter than the gray morning. They talked for hours about the hotel, Claire's work, their shared love of old jazz records. Eliza found herself opening up, sharing stories she rarely told, her teenage years sneaking into queer bars, the sting of her father's rejection, the quiet triumph of rebuilding the Grand Aurora. Claire listened, her eyes never leaving Eliza's. "You're incredible," she said, and for once, Eliza didn't deflect. She felt seen, not as the hotel owner or the waiter, but as herself. When their hands brushed across the table, neither pulled away. But the world wasn't done testing them. Back at the hotel, Eliza faced a new challenge, a scathing online review from one of the gala's guests, calling the service amateur and questioning her leadership. The words hit like a punch, echoing her father's doubts. She threw herself into work, determined to prove them wrong, but the pressure was relentless. And in the back of her mind, she wondered if vibrant Claire, could handle the chaos of her world. The review haunted Eliza for days. It wasn't just the words, amateur, unfit, but the way they clawed at her insecurities, whispering that she'd never be enough. She sat in her office, the Grand Aurora's ledgers spread before her, the numbers blurring as her mind replayed the gala. She'd built this place from nothing, yet one guest's cruelty could unravel her confidence. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from the spiral. Claire's name lit up the screen. "Dinner tonight?" "My treat." Eliza hesitated. She wanted to say yes, to lose herself in Claire's warmth, but the weight of the hotel's demands pressed down. Still, something in her, a flicker of hope, made her type okay. 7 p.m. They met at a cozy Italian place, its candlelit tables a stark contrast to the hotel's grandeur. Claire was already there, her smile softening the edges of Eliza's stress. "You look like you're carrying the world," Claire said, her voice gentle. Eliza laughed, a tired sound. "Just a hotel." But as they ate, Claire drew her out, asking about her dreams, her fears. Eliza admitted things she rarely voiced, the loneliness of her work, the fear of failing the people who believed in her. Claire reached across the table, her fingers lacing through Eliza's. "You're not alone in this," she said. The words were simple, but they landed deep, stirring something Eliza hadn't felt in years, trust. She squeezed Claire's hand, her guard slipping further. Their connection grew over the next weeks. Coffee dates turned into late-night walks, their conversations weaving between playful banter and raw confessions. Claire shared her own story, growing up in a small Oregon town, coming out to a family that struggled to understand, finding purpose in advocating for queer youth. Eliza admired her resilience, her ability to face rejection and still radiate warmth. It made Eliza want to be braver to let Claire in. But the hotel demanded her attention. A pipe burst in the West Wing, costing thousands. Staff turnover spiked, and another review, this one questioning her professionalism, hit the internet. Eliza felt the walls closing in. She threw herself into fixing things, working late, her phone silent as she ignored Claire's texts. She didn't mean to pull away, but doubt gnawed at her. Could she balance love and ambition? Could she be enough for Claire? One evening, Claire showed up at the hotel unannounced, her expression a mix of worry and determination. "You're avoiding me," she said, standing in the lobby, her voice soft but firm. Eliza's heart sank. "I'm not, it's just this place." She gestured vaguely, her hands shaking. "It's falling apart, and I'm trying to hold it together." Claire stepped closer, her eyes searching. "You don't have to do it alone." She reached out, her hand steadying Eliza's. "Let me in." Eliza wanted to argue, to protect the walls she'd built, but Claire's touch was an anchor. They sat in the empty ballroom, the silence heavy but comforting. Eliza confessed her fears of failing the hotel, of failing herself, of failing them. Claire listened, her presence a quiet strength. The next day, Claire returned with a plan. She'd rallied her nonprofit colleagues to host a fundraiser at the Grand Aurora, promising to bring positive attention to the hotel. Eliza was skeptical. Another event meant more pressure, but Claire's confidence was infectious. "This place is yours," Claire said. "Let's show the world what it can do." The fundraiser was a whirlwind of preparation. Eliza and Claire worked side by side, their rhythm seamless despite the chaos. Staff noticed the change in Eliza. Her smiles came easier, her shoulders less tense. But not everyone was pleased. A board member, Richard, a holdover from her father's era, cornered her during a planning session. "This event's too risky," he said, his tone sharp. "And your personal choices are drawing attention we don't need." Eliza's blood ran cold. She'd heard those words before, from her father, from others who saw her identity as a liability. Before she could respond, Claire stepped in, her voice calm but steel-edged. "Her choices built this hotel. Maybe you should focus on supporting her." Richard backed off, but his words lingered, a reminder of the world's judgment. As the fundraiser approached, Eliza felt the stakes rising. This wasn't just about the hotel anymore. It was about proving she could stand tall, not just as an owner, but as herself. And with Claire by her side, she began to believe she could. The fundraiser loomed like a storm on the horizon, its promise of redemption tangled with the risk of failure. Eliza barely slept, her nights spent poring over logistics, her days a blur of meetings and repairs. Claire was her constant, her texts a lifeline, "You've got this," but doubts still gnawed at Eliza's edges. The Grand Aurora buzzed with activity as the event neared. Staff strung fairy lights across the ballroom, their glow softening the room's grandeur into something warm, inviting. Claire's nonprofit team brought energy, their passion for the cause, safe spaces for queer youth, infusing the preparations with purpose. Eliza watched Claire direct volunteers, her confidence a quiet fire, and felt a surge of pride. This woman, who'd walked into her life by chance, was now her partner in this gamble. But the pressure was relentless. Richard, the board member, hovered like a vulture, his skepticism palpable. "This better not tank us," he muttered during a walkthrough, his eyes lingering on Eliza and Claire's clasped hands. Eliza's stomach twisted, but she held her head high. She'd fought too hard to let his disapproval shake her. The night of the fundraiser arrived, the ballroom transformed into a haven of light and music. Guests poured in, activists, donors, local queer community leaders, each one a reminder of what was at stake. Eliza wore a tailored suit, her short hair swept back, her nerves masked by a practiced smile. Claire, in a deep emerald dress, moved through the crowd with ease, her warmth drawing people in. When their eyes met across the room, Claire's wink was a spark, grounding Eliza in the chaos. The event started strong. Claire gave a speech, her voice steady as she spoke of the kids they served, teens like Eliza had been, searching for a place to belong. The crowd was rapt, donations pouring in. Eliza watched from the sidelines, her heart swelling with admiration. But then disaster struck. The sound system cut out mid-speech, plunging the room into awkward silence. Guests shifted uncomfortably, and Richard's glare burned from across the room. Eliza sprang into action, directing staff to troubleshoot while Claire improvised, engaging the crowd with stories of the kids they'd helped. Her calm kept the room from unraveling, and when the sound returned, the applause was thunderous. Eliza caught Claire's eye, mouthing a silent, "Thank you." Claire's smile was enough to steady her racing heart. As the night progressed, Eliza mingled, her confidence growing. Guests praised the hotel, the event, her vision. But not everyone was kind. A donor, an older man with a sharp suit and sharper eyes, approached her. "You're the owner?" he asked, his tone skeptical. "Didn't expect someone like you to pull this off." The words were a knife, subtle but cutting. Before Eliza could respond, Claire was there, her arm looping through Eliza's. "She's the heart of this place," Claire said, her voice warm but firm. The man backed off, but the encounter left Eliza shaken. Later, in a quiet corner, Eliza confessed to Claire. "I'm tired of proving myself," she said, her voice raw. "Every day, it's the same fight." Claire's hand found hers, her touch steady. "You don't have to prove anything to me," she said. "I see you." The words cracked something open in Eliza, a vulnerability she'd long buried. She leaned into Claire, their foreheads touching, the world fading to just the two of them. The fundraiser ended in triumph, raising more than their goal. Guests left buzzing, the hotel's reputation bolstered. But Richard's warning lingered. He pulled Eliza aside as the last guests departed. "This was a fluke," he said. "Your lifestyle is a distraction. The board's watching." His words were a cold reminder of the battles still ahead. Claire overheard, her jaw tightening. "He's wrong," she said once he was gone. "You're not a distraction, you're the reason this place shines." Eliza wanted to believe her, but fear whispered otherwise. As they stood together in the empty ballroom, the weight of the night settling around them, Eliza wondered if love could survive the scrutiny of her world, or if it would become another thing she'd have to fight for. The weeks after the fundraiser were a whirlwind. The Grand Aurora basked in newfound praise, bookings surging as word spread of the successful event. Eliza should have been elated, but Richard's words echoed in her mind, a shadow over her triumph. She threw herself into work, her days a blur of meetings and maintenance, her nights haunted by the fear that she'd never be enough, not for the board, not for the world, maybe not even for Claire. Claire sensed the shift. Their dates grew quieter, Eliza's smiles harder to coax out. One evening, as they walked along the Seattle waterfront, Claire stopped, her hand catching Eliza's. "Talk to me," she said, her green eyes searching. "You're pulling away." Eliza's throat tightened. She wanted to confess everything, the pressure, the doubt, the fear that loving Claire openly would give her enemies more ammunition. But instead, she said, "It's just work. I'm fine." She wasn't fine. The board was restless, Richard leading a quiet campaign to undermine her. He'd dug up old financial records, questioning her decisions, hinting that her personal life was a liability. Eliza overheard staff whispering about it, their loyalty wavering under the tension. She felt the hotel slipping from her grasp, the one thing she'd fought for above all else. Claire refused to let her retreat. She showed up at the hotel with lunch, dragged Eliza to jazz clubs, left notes tucked into her office, "You're enough." Each gesture chipped away at Eliza's walls, but the fear lingered. Could she have both the hotel and Claire? Or would one have to break? The breaking point came at a board meeting. Richard presented a proposal to sell the Grand Aurora to a corporate chain, arguing it would stabilize the business. "We need leadership that prioritizes profit, not personal agendas," he said, his eyes fixed on Eliza. The room went silent, the other board members shifting uncomfortably. Eliza's heart pounded, her voice steady but burning. "This hotel is my agenda," she said. "I've poured everything into it. You don't get to erase that because you don't like who I am." The meeting ended in a stalemate, but the threat hung heavy. Eliza retreated to her office, her hands shaking as she stared at the ledgers. Claire found her there, her presence a quiet balm. "You fought for this place," Claire said, her voice fierce. "Don't let him take it." Eliza's eyes stung. "What if I lose it? What if I lose everything?" Claire knelt beside her, her hand on Eliza's cheek. "You won't lose me." That night, they went to Eliza's apartment, a small loft overlooking the city. It was the first time Claire had been there, and Eliza felt exposed, her sparse furniture and scattered books revealing more than she intended. They talked until dawn, their confessions raw, Claire's fear of losing her own purpose, Eliza's dread of failing the people she loved. When Claire kissed her, soft and deliberate, Eliza let herself fall into it, the world's weight lifting for a moment. But the fight wasn't over. Richard escalated, leaking rumors to the press about the hotel's mismanagement. A local blog picked it up, twisting the narrative to question Eliza's competence and hinting at her personal life. The comments were brutal, slurs, assumptions, judgment. Eliza read them in her office, her chest tight, until Claire stormed in, slamming her laptop shut. "Don't do this to yourself," she said. "They don't know you." Eliza's voice broke. "But they're right about one thing, I'm struggling." Claire took her hands, her grip firm. "Then let me help. We'll fight this together." They spent the night strategizing, reaching out to allies, planning a public response, rallying the staff. Claire's nonprofit offered to host another event, a community open house to showcase the hotel's heart. Eliza hesitated, the risk daunting, but Claire's belief in her was unshakable. As they worked, Eliza realized something had shifted. Claire wasn't just her partner, she was her equal, her anchor. For the first time, Eliza felt like she wasn't fighting alone. But the battle ahead would test them both, and she couldn't shake the fear that love, like the hotel, might come at a cost she wasn't ready to pay. The open house was Eliza's last stand. The Grand Aurora gleamed, its lobby polished to perfection, its staff united behind her. Claire had rallied her network, bringing in local artists, musicians, and queer community leaders to fill the space with life. The event was meant to show Seattle what the hotel stood for, not just luxury, but a haven for those who'd been pushed to the margins. Eliza moved through the crowd, her nerves taut but her smile steady. Guests marveled at the hotel's history, its Art Deco details, the stories Eliza shared of its revival. Claire was everywhere, introducing performers, charming donors, her energy a beacon. When their eyes met, Claire's nod was a silent, "We've got this." But Richard hadn't given up. He arrived midway through, his presence a dark cloud. He cornered Eliza near the bar, his voice low. "This is a stunt," he said. "The board's voting next week. You can't charm your way out of this." Eliza's stomach dropped, but she held his gaze. "This isn't a stunt. It's who we are." He scoffed, walking away, but his words lingered like a threat. The night wasn't without hiccups. A protester, likely spurred by the blog's rumors, showed up outside, holding a sign decrying the hotel's agenda. Eliza's heart sank as guests noticed, their murmurs growing. Claire, ever quick, redirected attention, introducing a young poet whose words about identity and resilience silenced the room. Eliza watched, her chest tight with gratitude and something deeper, love, raw and undeniable. As the event wound down, Eliza took the stage. Her hands shook as she gripped the microphone, but Claire's presence in the crowd steadied her. "This hotel isn't just a building," she said, her voice clear. "It's a promise to create a place where everyone belongs, no matter who they are." The applause was deafening, but Eliza's eyes were on Claire, whose smile held a pride that made her heart ache. After, they slipped to the rooftop garden, the city quiet below. Claire pulled Eliza close, her voice soft. You were incredible. Eliza laughed, shaky. I was terrified. Claire's hand cupped her face. But you did it anyway. Their kiss was slow, grounding, a moment of peace in the storm. The board meeting loomed, and Eliza prepared for war. She and Claire spent days gathering support, letters from staff, testimonials from guests, financial projections showing the hotel's growth. Claire's nonprofit offered data on the community impact, proving the hotel's value beyond profit. Eliza felt a flicker of hope, but Richard's influence was strong, his allies on the board skeptical. The morning of the meeting, Eliza found a note from Claire slipped under her door. You're enough. Always. She clutched it like a talisman as she faced the board. Richard presented his case first, his words polished but cold, painting Eliza as a liability. When it was her turn, she stood tall, her voice steady. This hotel is my legacy, she said. Not my father's, not yours, mine. And I fought for it every day, not because of who I am, but because of what it stands for. The room was silent as she laid out her evidence, the numbers, the community support, the vision. Claire sat in the back, her presence a quiet strength. When the vote came, it was close, but Eliza won. The hotel was hers. Richard's face was stone, but he left without a word. Eliza found Claire outside, her eyes shining with tears. You did it, Claire said, pulling her into a hug. Eliza clung to her, the weight of the fight lifting. But as they stood together, she knew the world wouldn't stop challenging them. Love, like the hotel, would always require a fight. And for the first time, she was ready. The victory was sweet, but it didn't erase the scars. Eliza stood in the Grand Aurora's lobby the morning after the board meeting, watching sunlight stream through the stained glass windows. The hotel was hers, truly hers, but the fight had left her raw, her heart a mix of triumph and vulnerability. Claire arrived with coffee, her smile a quiet promise. You look like you need this, she said, handing Eliza a cup. They sat in the lobby, the space empty save for the hum of morning deliveries. Eliza traced the rim of her cup, her thoughts heavy. I keep waiting for the next battle, she admitted. Claire's hand found hers, steady as ever. You don't have to fight alone anymore. The words settled deep, unraveling the last of Eliza's walls. She'd spent years building armor against her father, the world, her own doubts, but Claire had slipped past it all. Their love wasn't just a spark, it was a foundation, strong enough to weather the storms. Eliza leaned into her, their shoulders brushing, the quiet intimacy a balm. The hotel thrived in the months that followed. The open house had cemented its reputation as a community hub, drawing guests who valued its heart as much as its elegance. Eliza hired new staff, loyal and passionate, and the reviews turned glowing. Richard faded into the background, his influence diminished, but Eliza knew others like him would come. She was ready. Claire became a fixture at the Grand Aurora, her nonprofit partnering with the hotel for regular events. They hosted queer youth workshops, art shows, fundraisers, each one a reminder of why Eliza had fought so hard. She and Claire grew closer, their lives intertwining. They argued sometimes about time, priorities, the weight of their worlds, but each fight ended in understanding, their love stronger for it. One evening, as spring bloomed over Seattle, Eliza took Claire to the rooftop garden. The jasmine was in full bloom, its scent weaving through the air. Eliza had planned this moment for weeks, her nerves a quiet hum. She pulled a small box from her pocket, her hands steady despite her racing heart. Claire, she said, her voice soft but sure, you've seen me, really seen me, when no one else did. Will you stay with me, build this life with me? Claire's eyes filled with tears, her smile radiant. Yes, she whispered, pulling Eliza into a kiss that felt like a vow. The ring, simple but elegant, slid onto Claire's finger, a promise of forever. They stood together, the city sparkling below, the hotel a testament